This is where the crammed immigrant passenger ships from Europe will dock. Oil is going to change the world. So in 1870, John D. Rockefeller forms the giant monopoly Standard Oil. A pious Baptist, he loves the new hymns Onward Christian Soldiers and Silent Night, both published in 1871. But the year in music belongs to the stunning new Giuseppe Verdi opera, Aida. Its first performance outside Italy takes place in Buenos Aires in October 1873 at the original Teatro Colón. Brahms, Dvorak, Tchaikovsky, and Strauss are at the peak of popularity. Gilbert and Sullivan comic operettas seduce the English. Music lovers in 1875 are scandalized by, then fall madly in love with, Bizet's exotic Spanish-themed opera, Carmen, and throughout the old world, people looking to the future seriously consider whether to move to or invest in the new land of opportunity, Argentina. While the first explorers had dreamed the widest estuary on Earth, Rio de la Plata, would lead to a mountain of silver, now the dreams are inspired by the vast pampas. Immigrants from mostly rural backgrounds arrive with hopes of a prosperous new life. But a rich oligarchy owns all the land and maintains a tight grip on the economy, opportunity, and society. Wheat, beef, and immigrants are powering a new nation, and European gold flows in like water. Half of all UK capital invested overseas goes to Argentina for decades, building railways and shipyards, granaries, meatpacking plants, and structures for commerce and pleasure. The 1%, at least, have managed to find a mountain of silver. In the rapidly expanding barrios, poor and humble gathering musicians trade folk songs from back home. Valse, polka, mazurka, musica folklorica, klezmer, opera, classical, and silver band music can be heard round every corner in the good air, in the streets, parks, and conventillos. Drifting across from Montevideo is exciting music in 2/4 time. Both ports are home to descendants of slaves and hundreds of dock workers from Central Africa Bantu and West Africa Yoruba tribes. Their god of thunder, Shango, calls them to dance to the fiery beat of their drums. Social clubs develop with the name candombe. Their rhythms mesh with the powerful, emotional habanera and flamenco of the Cubans and Spanish. Out of this mix, something new appears, a syncopated 2/4 style they call milonga, hugely popular from the 1870s. Author Ventura Lynch describes the influence Afro-Argentine dancers have on the city compadritos, the tough guy braggarts who hang out in the Afro-Argentine dance clubs. In 1883, Ventura writes,
"The milonga is danced only by the compadritos of the city, who have created it as a mockery of the dances the blacks hold in their own places."
Musical ideas from so many cultures are blending into something unique, but there is no tango yet. Valse criollo, candombe, and milonga, but nothing in tango's 4/4 time signature. Historians agree that the porteños in neighborhood dance halls first developed a style of dance to complement these musical rhythms from all over, and only later used them to form the tango. With no one knowing it, the basic partner moves of an extraordinary new dance are ready and waiting for its music to appear. One day in the 1870s, somebody brings ashore the curious new instrument that will have the impact of a slow-motion volcano. Balanced on his knees is a fascinating construction of wood, reeds, bellows, and buttons. This instrument is awkwardly called a bandoneon, and it too will struggle to make a new home on the Rio de la Plata. It comes from the silk and velvet manufacturing center, Krefeld, Germany, on the banks of the Rhine, where 22-year-old Heinrich Band had taken over his father's musical instrument shop. In 1846, Heinrich formed a group of artisans to source the materials for making instruments. The company's name was Band Union. In December 1850, Heinrich announced in print, "To friends of the accordion, by way of a new invention, we have once again remarkably perfected our accordions, and these new instruments, round or octagonal, from 88 to 144 voices, are available at our store." Heinrich saw an untapped market in all the smaller churches of Europe without a pipe organ. His new instrument would be an affordable stand-in while adding to the power of religious services for rural folk. His solution for elevating the accordion and concertina was dynamic and loud enough to fill any country church with compelling emotional music. We're listening to a Bach concerto for two harpsichords, performed by Maestro Claudio Constantini. But this instrument, without even a proper name, is difficult to master and strange to most, an ugly duckling. When Heinrich died in 1860, who could imagine that his ingenious instrument would inspire a new music and dance so far away from his music store? Legend says the first professional group of tango was two Afro-Argentines, Casimiro Alcorta violin and Sinforoso clarinet. We don't have pictures. They did small concerts in Buenos Aires from the early 1870s. Casimiro composed the song Carasuchia, which we know now after Canaro sanitizes its naughty original connotations 40 years later. Meanwhile, we can imagine an awkward reception in musical gatherings for the first intrepid bandoneon player. Right now, a bandoneonista simply can't play as fast as a violin, clarinet, or guitar, but it has the added appeal of making an excellent percussive hand drum. The loud, breathy, complex sound of the instrument is destined to become the pillar and soul of their new music and dance. When they finally slow down to let him join in, Tango Tango is on the way. How can a 2/4 time signature be made to feel right when played slower? That will take some time figuring out, time during which the bandoneon is just a side player, experimenting, trying to find a way in. First called Tango Habanera, Tango Criollo, or Tango Milonga, 4/8 is tried by some composers, but the comfortable 4/4 ultimately becomes tango time. It is right for dancing, even if it takes a few years to get there. It is 1895 and the so-called Old Guard era begins. The foundation songs of tango will now slowly start to flow like the river. And we have the name, with a picture, of the first star songwriter of tango. The tune we're listening to is the first copyrighted tango score, El Interiano. Released in 1896 with sheet music printed in 1898, the composer is Rosendo Mendizábal. Because of racial prejudice, he adopts the pseudonym A. Rosendo. A wealthy 30-year-old Afro-Argentine pianist, he thrives playing the dance salons run by his women friends, where tango is now the rage. Rosendo was born in 1868, just as our story here began. There couldn't be a more perfect person to be identified as the first tango hero. Owning the first copyrighted tango gives Rosendo a place in history he can never lose, unlike what happened to his inherited fortune. He died in 1913, but Canaro, Troilo, and DeSarli made sure his best songs did not fade away. The 20th century arrives in a whirlwind of change. The passing of old-world musical giants Verdi, Brahms, and Dvorak occurs as Argentina's tango stars of the future are being born. Now music lovers are inspired by the revolutionary technology of sound recordings. What if a tremendous hit song burst out to put tango on the world's gramophones? In 1903, the first tango ever recorded is it. Genial horseman, poet, and composer Angel Villoldo wants to put his songs on records. There are no recording facilities in BA, so he sails for Paris to record El Choclo. Angel's ability to connect with listeners through his melodies and intelligent humor now makes tango grow rapidly. Writer Nestor Pinzon calls Villoldo the great transformer of the Spanish tanguillos, cuples, and habanera into a river plate rhythm. Accompanying himself on guitar and harmonica, Angel works the cafes, poetically telling working-class, ribald stories through his songs. Angel Villoldo's many instantly memorable tunes strike a deep chord with the people. And he writes the lyrics for La Morocha, considered the first tango to become popular in Europe in 1907. With a sly wink at the awkward overstatement, Porteños begin referring to Angel as the father of tango. In 1907, Osvaldo Pugliese and Riccardo Tanturi are 2 years old. Rodolfo Biaggi 1, and Miguel Caló is born. Roberto Firpo begins his professional career, and the shiploads of immigrants just keep on coming. The year 1908, when Ford makes the first Model T and Olivetti the first typewriter, will have a huge impact on the city and on tango. After 20 years being closed for reconstruction, the magnificent Teatro Colón reopens to light up social life with a triumphant run of Aida. Buenos Aires is celebrating its status as the rich and powerful Paris of the South. In Europe, people refer to the wealthy as rich as an Argentine. Those living on the mountain of silver feel like this must surely be the top of the world. Across town, a Uruguayan, grown up in poverty in a BA Coventillo, is going to take a run at that mountain. 20-year-old Francisco Canaro commits to being a professional tango musician. He works very hard playing with and learning from his best friend down the street, rising star Vicente Greco. Pirincho wants girls, money, and fame. How spectacularly successful at attracting them all he will be. This moment in 1908 is when tango's godfather for the next 50 years tentatively enters the scene. It's almost as if Aida's grand entrance trumpets on Buenos Aires' classiest stage herald his coming. He will always feature a trumpet in his large orchestra. 20-year-old Charles Romuald Gardez begins calling himself Carlos Gardel in 1910, performing folklore. He doesn't sing tango because there is no such thing as tango canción yet. One day, a couple of inspired poets, Canaro and Gardel himself, are going to change all that. First, tango must mature, and 4 brilliant new composers in particular seize the moment. Juan Maglio, Vicente Greco, and Eduardo Arelas also elevate the bandoneon to prominence. Roberto Firpo does the same for the piano. The new songs from these 4 will give tango oxygen, direction, and a long life. By 1912, tango has its first real recording star, wonderful bandoneonista Juan Maglio. In boyhood, he heard his father play that German instrument which had nothing to do with an Italian immigrant, but which he will make the main instrument of tango. Recording with flute, violin, and guitar, Pacho is the first to put bandoneon solos on records and at the front of all arrangements. His success in Buenos Aires is so huge that for a time Porteños call all records Pachos. He has kicked down the door for the bandoneon and for tango as mainstream. The other 3 composing superstars are right with him. 22-year-old self-taught bandoneonista Vicente Greco has been studying music with Julio De Caro's father, who recognizes his superb talent. Greco musically mentors his close neighborhood pals, younger Julio De Caro and Pirincho Canaro. Vicente's breakthrough to fame comes one night in 1911 when he first plays his new song Rodriguez Peña in a milonga. The patrons are so excited by it, they carry him on their shoulders out of the club and victoriously along Corrientes Street. With two of his brothers in his hot band, he is now commanding a remarkable $200 per show. Everyone is impressed by that and his record sales, which for just El Morochito ring up 22,000 units in short order, not counting all the counterfeits already a fact of life. It is Vicente who coins the term Orquesta Típica. Not to be outdone by anyone, 20-year-old Eduardo Aralas, El Tigre del Bandoneon, attracts attention with his obvious brilliance both as a musician and composer. At 17, he asks the help of Canaro to put his first composition, Una Noche de Garufa, into musical notation. Pirincho writes it out for his violin. Eduardo enrolls in a music academy for 3 years studying theory and harmony. Now, Roberto Firpo takes him under his wing, and Eduardo moves with him to Montevideo to work the clubs. El Tigre plays first bandoneon in both his mentor's orquestas, meaning he is intimately involved in, a force himself and a huge part of, the tsunami of change Firpo and Canaro will soon bring to tango. It's 1913. Governments introduce the income tax. Avant-garde appears in the arts world. Stainless steel is invented in Sheffield and the zipper in Sweden. Roberto Firpo has been making his way well enough as a professional musician, but the only way he can communicate his ideas is to form his own orchestra, playing his original compositions and debuting a completely new tango arrangement style, his particular genius. A piano in an orquesta típica? 3 violins instead of 1? Counter melodies? All unheard of. Firpo takes the sound of tango in a whole new direction, and everybody gets new ideas from it. Canaro will soon be full of them, like why not add a double bass to the orchestra? The great future leaders who were not composers, such as D'Arienzo, Pugliese, De Sarli, and Troilo, will all rightly become famous by championing the songs of the brilliant composers of these days we have arrived at, giving them the ultimate respect they so richly deserve. For the songs we have seen listed are the backbone of the tango dancing catalog today. Because of Pacho, Greco, and Arola's breakthrough fame as bandoneonistas, some mistakenly conclude that 1910 is when the bandoneon arrived in Argentina. But the authority Arturo Penon showed that it was in Argentina long before it began to be imported from Germany in large numbers from 1900. It had taken 2 generations for Heinrich Band's complicated immigrant to make its way to the top. But there is more about El Choclo. Villoldo dies in 1919, but his tune becomes a smash hit in America and Europe in the 1950s, entering the charts a number of times by various artists known as Kiss of Fire. In 1914, tango is comfortably perched high on that mountain. Now holding a leader's baton, Francisco Canaros is the first orquesta admitted into aristocratic Buenos Aires houses where tango has always been resisted. Argentina's traveling rich and artists and the gramophone are successfully spreading it through European capitals. The continual flow of returns from the Rio de la Plata has been hugely profitable to the European businessmen sponsoring the long Argentine economic surge. Meanwhile, their wives and daughters take to the tango that follows the money.